been experiencing weird things in my apartment for some time, and it has me thinking about two houses I lived in with my family about 15 years ago. The second one containing the majority of the activity. I'm not sure where else to share it all, so I figured this space was appropriate. I'm in my late 20s now, and even thinking about it honestly still brings me to tears. It still scares me, so maybe this will be therapeutic in a way. For some background, my mom and I have had paranormal experiences pretty much our entire lives. I remember strange things happening in our home as a kid, but it really started to escalate when I was around 10 years old. We had recently moved into a new home to start over. I had a new stepdad, and this was the first house where we all lived under one roof together. One night, our neighbor's teenage son hanged himself in their basement. We found out through a different neighbor that he had either been friends with and/or babysat for someone who lived in our house before us. I can't remember which. Our house started getting weird after it happened. My little brother, who was 4 or 5 at the time, would wake up constantly in the middle of the night saying a boy kept asking him to play and wouldn't let him sleep. Mom would ask him questions, like what the boy looked like and what else he was doing. Because this became an every night thing. The boy he described matched the description of the neighbor's deceased son. We had never met him. My brother, we'll call him B, was terrified of the second floor of the house. It was originally a large attic that had been converted into a bedroom. The stairs were pretty steep, so Mom took that bedroom. B never wanted to go up there unless Mom was there too. Our stepdad, we'll call him J, thought it'd be funny one day to mess with him. He told B that Mom was upstairs and wanted to see him. B walked up the stairs and J closed the door. After a few moments, B started screaming bloody murder and banging on the door and said there was something up there that was scaring him. He sounded genuinely terrified, so J let him out and apologized and asked what scared him. B didn't say anything and barely talked the rest of that day, and never brought it up again. When we moved into the house, there was a random pile of bricks in the basement. We weren't sure why they were there, but we didn't know what to do with them, so we just didn't mess with them. The washer and dryer were down there, so one night Mom was doing laundry while she was home alone. She heard a noise, like the bricks were moving, and she said one was thrown right past her head. If she had tilted her head even an inch more in that direction, it would have made contact. There was absolutely no explanation for it. Safe to say, we immediately looked into moving. As 13 years old, we moved into the house that still puts the biggest feeling of dread in my gut. Mom and Jay now had my 3-year-old sister M. When we moved in, there was a new landlord, and he was having renovations done. It was an old house, so the floors downstairs especially needed some TLC. They were finishing those up when we moved in. One weekend, I had my best friend spend the night. She was acting really strange, so I asked what was up. She kept saying the house made her feel weird, and every time we were inside, she felt sick. We had one of those spirit box apps on an iPod, so we decided to use it and walk around the house. It kept saying, "hung," in my closet, and everywhere else it repeatedly said, "run" and "go." In a corner of the app, it would constantly generate different letters. I was never really sure what those meant, but this time it was continuously generating J's initials. We'd used this app countless times before, and it never did any of that, so we were pretty freaked out. Some info before I tell this particular part of the story. The basement door was in the kitchen, and it was extremely heavy. Jay could barely even open this door. M was only a toddler, so Mom had it shut and locked at all times. It was an unfinished basement, and we had other areas in the house for storage, so we never went down there anyways. My parents worked at the hospital, and they were mostly midday shift, so they were there well into the evenings, and I was finally deemed old enough to be able to stay home by myself instead of going to our grandparents' house. So one night I was home alone, playing Sims, and listening to music. These were the days of listening to music on YouTube. Many horrible quality recordings. So I had a random playlist going, and I started to hear talking in the background of the song. I figured the video quality just wasn't great, and went to change it, but when the song stopped playing, the voices didn't. My immediate thought was, oh, the neighbors are outside again, because anytime the window was open and they were outside, they were so loud it sounded like they were right next to you. I went to close the only window in the room, and it was already closed. My next thought was, someone had to have left a TV on in the house when they left earlier that day. I went to every room in the house with a TV in it, and nothing was on. But something I did notice was the voices never got more distant and the volume never changed. Honestly, I was freaking out so badly at this point that I was not registering what the voices were even saying. But it sounded like two men just having an everyday conversation, like how you would talk to a coworker or acquaintance. Since we still had the floors being worked on downstairs, I wondered if maybe a couple workers were somehow still there. I went downstairs and I was alone. The driveway was also empty. I could still hear those men. I started panicking and went upstairs, locked myself in my room, and called Mom's unit, bawling my eyes out. The men even sounded like they were in my bedroom with me. Once she got to the phone, I heard heavy footsteps, like someone wearing big work boots, downstairs, stomping from room to room. The basement door kept opening and slamming shut, shaking the house. My mom was using another work phone to call anyone nearby to come to the house, as she and Jay were about 30 minutes away. I was so terrified I wondered if I was ever even going to see Mom again. Just pure fear. All of a sudden, everything stopped. Luckily, the landlord was not even 5 minutes away and rushed to the house. He said there were no signs of forced entry, nothing was missing, no footprints, the basement door was still locked. No one was in or around the house. The only thing that was abnormal was my food had been knocked off the counter and was scattered around the kitchen. I was never home alone after that. I refused. Em hated being in her bedroom. She never wanted to be in there with anyone, not even to play. Mom thought she was just going through a phase and was trying to help her fall asleep one night. Em kept saying the girl and pointing at a wall. Mom asked, what girl? Em told her there was a girl who cried a lot, wore her hair in pigtails, and would say, I hate your mommy, before crying harder and floating through the wall. At this point, Mom was not fucking around anymore and had done some research online. She had read that you can take pictures of an area with activity and maybe catch something on film. So Em took Mom around the house and pointed out where this girl was, and Mom took around 50 pictures. To be clear, Mom and Jay never smoked in the house. No one was cooking, no candles or incense were burning. Every single photo had this thick blue smoke in it. We didn't wipe the lens, just to make sure. And after Em said the girl was gone, Mom took another few pictures. No smoke. We had a video camera, and one night this ball was rolling all throughout the first floor of the house. Keep in mind, these floors were just done. No warping, no curves, they were perfect. This ball was rolling in loops from room to room, never slowing or increasing in speed. After a couple minutes of recording, it stopped abruptly and never did it again. We watched the video back, and 2010 quality aside, it was clear as day. But when we brought the camera to someone's house to show them, the video was a black screen. At this point, we contacted a priest from down the street to come over and bless the house. He took one step onto our porch and said he felt ill and didn't want to come inside. He refused any time after that. So, we called local paranormal investigators. The whole time they were there, no activity was happening, and they generally didn't seem to believe us. Before they left, they knocked on a wall 3 times to see if something knocked back. Silence. They kinda laughed at us and left. Literally, the second the front door closed, we heard 3 slow, loud knocks on that same wall. Things started to get more frequent after that. Whatever it was, we were slowly making it more irritated. Mom prefers incense over candles, and she had a huge collection of different scents. People frequently got them for her as gifts as well. One day she had a new scent, frankincense. All of our bedrooms were on the 2nd floor, and she burned it in her bedroom window. Strangely enough, after this, like 75% of the activity upstairs decreased. It was still there, but not quite as bad. Everywhere else, I can't say the same. I started to feel very uneasy. Especially on the staircase. I would feel like someone was breathing down my neck, or waiting for me at the top or bottom landing, whichever way I was going. Something I just couldn't shake. One evening, I was heading upstairs for the night. As I was walking up, Mom started talking to me. So once I got to the top landing, I turned around and continued the conversation. Now, I was barefoot, nowhere near the edge of the steps. There was no spill, and no one else was upstairs. I started to feel this odd sensation on my back, like there was a hand touching me. Next thing I knew, I was falling down the stairs. It was like my legs were suddenly kicked out from under me. Luckily, I wasn't hurt, just sore and winded, but Mom was horrified. She said the way my body fell was not ordinary for someone who just slipped or fell on their own. One evening, Jay was on night shift. I was getting ready for bed, and Mom said, "Pack a bag now. We're staying the night somewhere else." I was super confused because it was a school night, but she wouldn't tell me what was happening. We got out to the car, and I realized I left something inside. Before we left the house, Mom would always do a walkthrough to make sure every light was off. When we turned around, facing the house, every single light was on. Even the lamps and night lights. I decided I didn't need whatever it was, and we drove to our grandparents' house. At this time, Mom and I had never really discussed what was going on in our house. I knew it, she knew it, but there was so much denial. I kept bugging her, asking what happened, and she finally told me. She had confronted the landlord about everything that day. He looked into the property and discovered the history. Multiple people had died in the house over the years, including a man who went into cardiac arrest in our living room and dropped dead. There was an old woman who had been left to rot by her grandson in what was now M's room. It's sickening to even think about that. We'd always wondered why there was an old latch on the outside of my sister's bedroom, and had deduced it to just being something odd left over from renovations. The house had originally been a single-family home, but was converted into 2 halves, so there were odd choices throughout from the split. That evening, a maintenance worker needed to get in the crawl space under the house. He crawled out without finishing the job and said he couldn't go back in there. He had found deep pits under our house with broken shovels peeking out and old dirty work boots inside. We came back to the house the next day because Mom needed a game plan. She found some friends of a friend who were part of a different paranormal team and asked them to come spend a night in the house. They said there was such a dark presence there. They picked up what they believed were multiple spirits, some gooish, neutral, some very angry. At one point, it was brought up that they believed there could be a portal on the property. Not really sure what all that entails, so I don't remember those details. They thought there could be a demon present, especially once Mom told them that she and I heard each other speaking frequently when the other wasn't home. They apparently can mimic voices to fuck with you. Once the reduced activity upstairs was brought up, they asked what scents Mom burns and looked at her collection. They had a theory that the frankincense had essentially banished the worst spirit from entering the second floor. She was told never to burn it again in case it was quarantined to one area, the stairs, and made even angrier.